I'm Linda Brown. I want to start off by acknowledging country and a personal acknowledgement. This conversation that we're having today has been had in country through stories and through conversations for centuries by elders past and present. And I want to make a commitment today to respect these conversations and the conversations that we're about to happen and really listen and hopefully, and I know, go away with some action that will hopefully make the world a more equitable place. So thank you. I'm going to get my panel to introduce themselves because I could not do any of them any justice. And they're going to spend about 3 to 4 minutes just framing up the conversation from their point of view. This will be interactive. You know, once a school teacher, always a school teacher. So we really want to get some questions from the floor, and we will be asking you a few questions during this conversation. But I'm going to throw myself out there, you know. I've heard a lot yesterday and today about getting buy-in from the CEO and leading from the top. Around, not only just around the SDGs, but all the other, I suppose, frameworks that we see as business people every day to commit to. I'm a CEO. I've just built the first new university in Australia in 20 years, big responsibility. 21,000 students in 5 years, 11,000 international students still in country, okay? And I am shit scared about doing this panel. Absolutely shit scared. That's a technical term, and it's very Scottish Australian. I'm worried I'll get it wrong. I'm worried I'll say the wrong thing, you know, and that also plays through my role as a CEO. Sometimes that fear of getting it wrong can actually paralyze you into doing nothing. Yeah, anybody else feel like that in the room? Can you show me your hands? Because I certainly do. Isn't it a lot of us? Yeah, so my panel have promised me today that they are going to leave us with some real practical context, some real practical things that we can go away and do and commit to do to make the world a fairer place. That sounds like a good gig, doesn't it? Sounds like we're going to go away with something that's really, really useful today. So I'm not the expert, but I'm here to learn, to listen, to respect. So I want to hand across to my first panel member, Shelly, who's going to introduce herself and give us a bit of context. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Hi, everybody. First of all, I'm a Jitterbal woman from northern Queensland in the Atherton Tablelands, but I live and work in Sydney and spend a lot of time in Melbourne. And so for that reason, I also would like to acknowledge that I'm on the land of others, as many of you are too. And I pay my respects and acknowledge the fantastic acknowledgement of country that we had yesterday at the same time. So, yes, I'm Shelly Reyes. I'm a partner of KPMG. I'm also the CEO and owner of Arilla Indigenous Consulting. We've been around for nearly 30 years and we specialise in a couple of handful of things. Shit scared is probably what we specialise in. I have this theory that when you put the term First Nations, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, Indigenous, all those kind of words on top of something, reconciliation, that there's really good-natured, amazing people that start to get nervous. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, making a mistake, sounding racist. They start to fall over themselves, and before you know it, you've got the most amazing people that are stuck in inertia because they're afraid of putting a step in the wrong place. And so, you know, they end up walking on eggshells. Of course, if people are walking on eggshells, you and everybody else within your organisation, you're not going to get anywhere. And so the way that I describe my work is that I remove the eggshells. So I'm giving people, individuals, leaders first and foremost, and then the broader workforce, information and skills, but also confidence to be able to work in the Indigenous and reconciliation spaces better. And whatever that means to you, enabling that to happen more effectively so that you're able to reach some of the goals that you have. I guess the other thing that we're most known for is, and I'm most known for, I guess, is leading some big discussions around national change and national significance. So I was the first chairman for Reconciliation Australia. I was on the board for 10 years, launched the Reconciliation Action Plan program. Many of you in the room, I'm sure, have heard of a RAP, or Reconciliation Action Plan. Parliament's apology to the stolen generations. I was the co-chair for the National Australia Day Council for 10 years. You would know that better as Australia Day and the Australian of the Year Awards. So conversations around repairing the relationship between Indigenous Australians and the wider community and enabling that to happen across the nation, and my pet focus, the corporate sector. Over to Murray. Can I just say also how proud I am to be sitting here with Murray and Sasha. I'm fans of both of them.
Where do I start? My name's Murray Saylor. My family's from the Eastern Islands of the Torres Strait. Who's heard of the Torres Strait Islands? Who's actually been there? Nice. We'll catch up later on. Nice. My tribal groups are some Sep, some Kareb and Zagareb. I walk in the footprints of Koikumabo and the native title proponents that led before me, and I'm just trying to continue their work. I'm the managing director and founder of Takehome Management Consultants, bootstrap business, 100% Indigenous owned. No handout, do it the tough way, do it the right way, and do it the good way, which all highlights in regards to our recent journey. We've just come on board with the GCNA family as one of the members of that particular organisation, and really, really proud to do that, and also drive the reason why we're doing this, why we're here and why we're doing this work. My company focuses on working with clients, both corporate, government, and also communities, being the conduit and the connector between traditional culture and the corporate world around social procurement, sustainable procurement, but more importantly, supply diversity, not just within the Indigenous sector, but in the diversity and inclusion sector as well, which is just as important. When I look at the title today, Overcoming the Inequality, right? It's as an Indigenous entrepreneur who's up here, as a Torres Strait entrepreneur, and more importantly, as a father, as a husband, and as a brother that's up here. I'm going to refer to all of you as brothers and sisters. You're all family. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture is not just a them and us. The one thing about the risk and the fear and the things that we deal with is we have to own it as well, as wider Australian, as part of our particular piece. In regards to our work, I share very humbly. I've got a very, very diverse team, primarily a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters. We've created approximately $850 million of social procurement value over the last 3 years, only with 6 people. Thank you.
And just been shortlisted for a procurement award just 10 minutes ago.
So thank you. So the SIPs just got shortlisted, so humbly share that. Thanks, sis. Yeah, anyway. Always humble, right? Always humble. The other piece in regards to I want to share is that we work with corporates, not across the table. We're working side by side. I think a lot of the conversation that we've been having since yesterday, and also the conversations that we're hearing virtually, is not about it being... We're the martyrs, we're the people out there providing the services. What we need to do is evolve that journey and that footprint to work side by side, to champion, collaborate, develop a relationship, but we find it hard. What is the risk? How do we mitigate that within our own supply chains, which is a bit of a passion for me as well. But more importantly, understand the communities that we're actually there working at and supporting. Not just our remote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, not just our regional, not just our metro, but each and every other brother and sister that we work side by side with each day when we're actually living in our own lives. So we're really, really humbled to be here, and respects to you all, and appreciate the conversation. Over to my sister, Sasha.
Thank you, Murray. I guess you might ask, well, why is a CEO and co-founder of a furniture design company sitting up here on the stage with these incredible people? It's really because we've had an ongoing impact program that I started in the business for the last 11 years, where we have tried to work out ways where we could use our expertise, so our design skills and our access to market, to collaborate with Indigenous artists, First Nations artists from all around Australia, to create income earning opportunities. So over the course of that program, we have created $1.3 million worth of income that's gone directly to the artists and to the art centres that we work with. And I guess that really stemmed from I wasn't born in Australia, my parents aren't Australian, and I could never really understand why Australia didn't really celebrate our First Nations history and culture and recognise that it was something defining. And I felt very strongly that we needed to work out a way, if there was a way that I could help to highlight that culture and that knowledge and act as a conduit, I guess, to allow that to happen, then that was something that I thought was very important for us to do. And I was lucky enough to be in charge of an organisation that I'd founded specifically really to do that. So it's been a very long journey, but very much built on the idea that it was a genuine collaboration. So all of our projects work in that way, which was really beautiful when Mandy was doing the acknowledgement or Welcome to Country yesterday, that she talked about that. That's very much at the heart of the way we approach things, and very much at the heart of the conversations that we have and the very long-term relationships that we've built.
If I come back to business, you guys just represent it all. You know, you're talking about corporate, Shelly, you're talking about supply chains, you're talking about Indigenous businesses on their own. You know, we talk about how do we create equality in other businesses by bringing in First Nations, but the First Nation ecosystem around business in itself is amazing. You said to me the other day that First Nation business was recognised more internationally than it maybe was in Australia. Can you expand a little bit more on that for me? Because it was a really interesting aha moment for me.
Yeah, and look, before I move on, I just want to pay respects to country as well. As a Torres Strait Islander, we're visitors on this country and really, really proud to be here. We're born, we live, and we die on this. I just want to pay respects before I move on. Sister, I suppose in regards to a lot of the work that we're doing, and we're moving in regards to our business, is around investment, trade, and export. Great in regards to our domestic product, all our various policies, creating a lot of opportunities for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses nationwide. But in regards to our international footprint, a lot of work that we're doing, we've had the opportunity to do in other countries, which has been very, very humbling. We seem to get recognised more when we're offshore than we are actually onshore. Right now, you think about that. So we're a small company. My sister here, family members, and other Indigenous businesses are also asked the question, how do you create social procurement value within your communities? It's the give back, right? How do you give back to brothers and sisters? But we're getting recognised more when we're offshore than we're actually onshore. We're a small company that's created multi-million dollars of social procurement value, and we get more recognition when we're offshore working in Aotearoa, in Hong Kong and Canada, than we actually do here in our own country. So just wanted to share that. Thank you very much, sister.
Shelly, from your point of view, you know, corporates, there's some really good examples of things that are going on and are working really well. Can you share some of that with us?
There are lots of organisations doing great things, and I think we would all agree that in terms of symbolism, we're seeing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and cultural practice visually more than we ever have done before. We're seeing the corporate sector and leaders within the corporate sector acknowledging country, arranging a welcome to country as we did here yesterday. And so, but also beyond the symbolic stuff, we're also seeing a lot of practical change, which is very useful as well. If I was just to look at the Reconciliation Action Plan space just for a moment, because I know how popular that is across the corporate sector, there's around 1,200 RAPs in existence today. They cover about 35% of Australia's workforce. And there are several tiers to a Reconciliation Action Plan, the highest tier being an Elevate RAP. So that status RAP indicates that there are people, this organisation is not doing the business as usual kind of stuff, but instead are really moving outside the box, really thinking beyond the boundaries of what other people are thinking.
So I'm just wondering, I wonder if we can ask, is it
Sure.
okay?
Yeah, sure.
Who's actually got a rap in their organisation at the moment? So just keep it up. So who's got a reflect rap? Yep, innovate, elevate, and anything above that, that's just an Indigenous engagement plan.
You know, those people that put up their hand, I think it would be a fantastic idea if you sort each other out and perhaps use the attendance list as a means of doing it. I'm going to say it now. Meet at the registration table over there at the beginning of lunchtime, find each other and have a conversation with each other about what's working, what isn't, what's out of the box for you, what's business as usual for you. And I would really encourage you to also start talking about how are you getting a whole of organisation approach. So moving the whole prospect of responsibility right across the organisation as opposed to just with you that's here today. Anyway, where was I? Right.
You're giving us some corporate examples of good practice.
He does this to me. So yes, those elevate raps are the ones that really do give us a fine example, usually, of where to place our energies, who to look to, and that therefore those people that have an elevate rap have a very strong leadership responsibility. Because they're often paving the way, not just within their organisations, but across other organisations too. Some of the most interesting ones, I think, are the ones that, if I go one step back, the best practice, there's so many best practice examples of a solid Indigenous strategy, whether it's a RAP or anything else, but one of them is understanding what the business case is. So why are you doing this? Why does it make good business sense? Not just what does it make great sense from a corporate citizenship perspective and a social justice or social contribution perspective, but what is the business case that sits underneath it? So, for example, do our customers and our clients expect this from us? Do they expect us as the organisation that we are to be dancing in the reconciliation space or the Indigenous space? And if we do this well, therefore, are we meeting their expectations? Are our competitors also dancing in this space? And 9 times out of 10 they are. They're already working in this area, and so it's really important to stay in step with your customers as well as your competitors. Does it make us more profitable by being able to demonstrate the work that we're doing? And in what ways are we able to demonstrate that? So are we doing things that are measurable, and are we able to show the impact on the ground with the communities that we work with as well as within the organisation itself? There's lots of good reasons and really easy ways of demonstrating that this stuff affects the bottom line in a positive way. And when those people who don't want to subscribe to the corporate citizenship idea of the world, they will usually subscribe to the notion that it makes us more profitable. And when it makes us more profitable, it means that it's a line item on the budget year on year. And when it's a budget line item year on year, there's a long-term focus. And you'll only ever make a real impact in this area if you're prepared to have a long-term focus. So generally that's what we're seeing in those RAPs that are the most senior RAPs, and the organisations that do this well is they start at the business case and then they move from there into thinking about leadership, the role of leaders within an organisation, the role of the broader community across the organisation, how they partner with organisations, and we already got some great ideas from our Acknowledgement of Country, Mandy, yesterday, you know, that notion of consultation and collaboration, and it goes like this. So starting from the beginning in partnership with people, doing things in partnership with them as opposed to doing things to them and for them. You know, all those sort of things are the hallmarks of a really great strategy and a really great internal and external focus.
It wouldn't be Linda Brown leading a panel if I didn't ask the government for something as part of this panel. May as well take the opportunity just in case there's anybody in the room. I'm in Canberra tomorrow, so I'm sure it'll still be in my head. But when we created the brand new university, private university on the NASDAQ, at that time we were the largest public benefit corporation in the world. And the public benefit corporation status in the US gave us an opportunity to be truly purpose-driven. We could say to our shareholders and our stakeholders, purpose is as important as profit. I just think it would significantly change the environment in Australia if the government was brave enough to bring in a kind of area for business to be incorporated as a public benefit corporation.
I'd love to hear from my sister, Sasha, but just want to share that in regards to, one of the challenges that we've had within the Indigenous business sector and communities overall is this notion of a handout to a hand-up type mentality. I think 100% in regards to there's some responsibility around government, but in regards to our Indigenous business sector, there's also a lot of mature businesses and businesses in the ecosystem that are working within your supply chains, I'm sure. When you'd look at them and go, one, they may not potentially didn't know that they're Indigenous. Let's be honest. In regards to the metrics that's out there's a lot of Indigenous businesses that don't identify as Aboriginal and/or Torres Strait Islander businesses, and that's okay. That's okay. The other piece in regards to it is around the government can only do so much, right? So around the pieces that we want to talk to you about and today about is around going, there's RAPs, these frameworks are there to be able to help guide your journey. It's not the answer, it's not the be-all and end-all. It's about demystifying the risk. We hear that term all the time. But it's about having real conversation with your supply chain, with brothers and sisters that are actually inside your community, that are fathers, that are mothers, that are parents, to be able to get to understand their stories, to also demystify the unconscious bias that we have in our own spirits sometimes. But also from a commercial and social impact perspective, that's even more so. But in regards to the Indigenous business sector, like my sister here, her evolution of her journey in regards to KPMG, which has been amazing, by the way, and my sister, in regards to the stuff that you've been doing, there's a really, really great opportunity to work with and evolve it. It's not them and us, it's us. My sister, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sasha, so coming on to you from that and exactly building on, I suppose, what I was talking about and what Murray was talking about, because it's not one or the other, it's both. You know, business have got to take responsibility and move forward, but part of a way of getting business to lean in more always is the bottom line. And if there's a tax incentive to doing good, we're going to get more people. You know, it's like the debate about quotas. You know, it starts a conversation. Really interested in your business. You know, you've got B Corp status. I don't know how you get I know you're committed to, the SDGs. I know that you're committed to RAP. There's just so many different frameworks and language, and I was totally confused when I started doing my homework for today. How do you cut through all that? And just, how do you keep that purpose-driven mission for your business? And how do you simplify that into a language that helps us as business owners to not get tied up in knots around all the frameworks that are out there and commitments?
Ultimately, I think it is about actually looking at why you're doing it and approaching things from a heartfelt perspective. So there's no point, I definitely understand what Shelly's saying in terms of putting the business case forward, because I think, particularly in larger organisations, you do have to convince multiple stakeholders to get on board. But from a leadership perspective and from the perspective of how you approach the conversations, I know, when we first started looking at this, it took 3 years of research and development of relationships before we were ready to sort of finally have the initial conversation with a potential partner. And the real reason for that was because I was really terrified of putting something forward that would be seen to be culturally inappropriate or, wouldn't be the right thing. And in the end, I worked out that actually the only way I was ever going to answer that question was if I actually had the conversation with someone, and that I could go around and around in my head about it and try and research it. But until I actually had the conversation, and I was very lucky that the first person we spoke to was Mavis Gunninbar, who's an incredible Yolngu artist from Elko, who we still work with today and who I have a very long-standing relationship with. But really at the end, I sort of concluded that I was approaching it from the right perspective. I wanted to genuinely learn. There was a genuine curiosity there, and an openness and a sense of compassion, I guess. And that was the framework in which we sort of started the conversation. And I feel like at the end of the day, if you can keep reminding yourself of that, and if your intentions are good in coming into it, then I believe that even when you make mistakes, if you've built the right relationships and a level of trust between you, that people forgive mistakes as well. And you know, I think you still need to approach things in a considered way, and you do have an obligation to educate yourself and to learn. But I also think that paralysis is something that I think is holding Australia back as well.
Shelly, moving on from that, because, you know, I mean, servant leadership, thank God, is a new normal now for leadership in all types of businesses. Thank goodness the world is changing and realises that we don't need this hierarchical, ego-driven, you know, CEOs at the top of businesses. But even though there's an expectation as a leader in a company that you have a level of knowledge or you're leading a conversation, how do you help businesses facilitate a safe space to have that conversation that Sasha had with that Indigenous artist? How can we create safe places to have that courageous conversation with leaders who might not be as open as all as we are and say that they're scared because they're trying to hold it all together? How do you do that?
I think it is really important for the most senior people within an organisation to feel confident and capable to have this conversation. If they're not capable and confident, then they'll do nothing in terms of their leadership role, first and foremost. So how do you give people the skills and confidence? Well, I think that, as Sasha has said and does so well, it's really important to educate yourself, because when you know more, you can do more. And in my experience, you know, back in the early 90s under a Keating government, that's how old I am, I was involved with the Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation, which was the first time the word reconciliation had been introduced to Australia in a formal manner. And my role was as state manager around education of the wider community. Went on to be the first chairman for Reconciliation Australia, so there was another 10 years, and throughout that entire time the focus did not change, that being how do we educate the wider Australian community about our shared history. What does that look like? How does that impact on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today? How does it impact on the workplace? How does it change our leadership style? And how does it change what we do internally in order to be effective? So I really do believe that educating yourself and those people around you, so your sphere of influence and the wider workforce, is absolutely critical. And it's only then that you can really create that whole of organisation approach. It's only then that people can be cognisant about the role that they can play and will play it. So I think that's the cornerstone. And leaders want to know something very specific. They want to know, how do I lead in this space? How do I talk to my shareholders about this? And how do I talk to them about why we are involved and what we are doing? How do I talk to other stakeholders and our partners? How do I talk to our teams? How do I bring them along with me on this journey instead of leaving people behind? And when you give them that information and you give them the safe space to do that, I do really, I call them intimate, really, small discussion groups of 20 leaders at a time. I try not to make it larger than that because people clam up. To have those very safe conversations and to ask those sort of questions so that they can walk away and have more informed discussions, make more informed decisions and lead. And it's only then, I think, that we can really make a difference. I also think that there is a great expectation on organisations to not just be involved in the space but to do it well. And every part of the organisation needs to be clear about what that means for them, and it will be a different story for everyone. And, you know, back to the notion of understanding the business case, and going back to Sasha's point, you know, there's also a cost, a bottom line cost to not doing it well, and that should be mentioned too. Sasha's very good at partnerships with local First Nations peoples, and she's already given you a small insight into that and how she does that. And there's a real cost to not doing that well, as much as there is to doing it well. And I should say that, you know, people talk about the transparency notion of those relationships, and I actually think for those organisations that aren't partnering with local people well, it's incredibly transparent. People know what they're doing and what they're not doing. We don't want to be those people, so I think it's a really good reason to do that, as much as it is for the impact that you're having with those partners on the ground who more often than not really enjoy the kind of partnerships they have with people like Sasha.
And just to go on that, I suppose, in regards to it, it's great to have the conversation. It's about putting stuff in action. A lot of talk is had, a lot of conversation is had, a lot of plans are developed. A lot of them are sitting on a shelf somewhere, or they aren't understood in regards to the focus of those particular documents. And organisations like the three of us and other brothers and sisters, and including yourself, it's around our responsibility about putting those plans, those words, into appropriate action that's actually relevant, realistic for your organisation. Do you understand when they're actually going to be talking about Aboriginal? Do you understand which communities you're actually working with? Who are those tribal groups that you're actually working with? What is the actual value proposition back into your shareholder group? How do you communicate that? These are conversations that are always had. Conversation. What we need to be seeing, and what we're seeing a lot more of in regards to, if I had to share something today, is around your supply chains. Do you understand your supply chain? Do you understand the value you're trying to create upstream and downstream within it? Do you understand the metrics that may be tied to an SDG, that may be tied to a state policy? It may be an Indigenous procurement policy that you're recording back into. But what does it actually mean for your business? What does it mean for your role? Are you the right person to be driving that? These are things that we're always facing up and against, but also an opportunity to improve and evolve. Sister Sasha?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I've got anything to add to that to that one, Murray.
I'll pick up on a question that I've seen here, if that's okay. They're scrolling in front of me. So the notion of a business case, and the question was around whether it can include things like reputation, you know, how these things affect your brand, and the absolute answer is yes, and that's really easy to measure, and it does, it really does. Speaking as an Aboriginal woman and someone who works in business, trust me, everyone knows whose brand is affected in a positive or negative way because of the work they do in this space. Can I say, as one of the people that was involved in the notion of reconciliation action plans and broader Indigenous and reconciliation strategies, these things are often designed around the notion, as was a RAP, that you would have KPIs linked within the RAP so that multiple people have a very clear responsibility on which they are measured around this topic, so that it no longer becomes a nice to have but a must have. And I think that that's one of the imperatives of getting that whole of organisation approach. There's also some really, really, really clear data too, of course, of the link between staff engagement and loyalty and an organisation doing this stuff well. And another, if you needed it, another reason to make sure that not only what you're doing is transparent, logical and impactful, but you're also communicating what you're doing across the organisation really clearly, that the comms that go out internally make it clear what you're doing because they want and need and like to know.
I'm going to come to the floor in a minute, and really for you either to share a short example of good practice or something that you've got a challenge with these incredible people on the panel. But Murray, while we're waiting on that, somebody's come back and really, I suppose, asked us to drill down a little bit more than that, as you say, that rhetoric. So you mentioned having greater visibility and respect from international stakeholders. What can specifically Australian businesses learn from these stakeholders and their approach?
The one thing in regards to this space, I think, is just to strip it all the way back down to its basic element is the companies that we deal with from an international perspective, they understand what they're actually looking for in regards to their bottom line value. And it's not just triple bottom line value, it's quadruple bottom line value. Because a lot of our brothers and sisters that we've dealt with, and I'm only talking from our experience, and I'm sure my sisters here would evolve that a little bit, is that they're literally cultural businesses. Like we're dealing with international Aboriginal businesses that are working in the global village, that are doing stuff that kick and tail in the SDGs in a really, really impactful way, not just in a corporate perspective in regards to the suit, obviously, it's really great and stuff, but in regards to their communities. But the one thing is around understanding. The idea in regards to empowerment, around equality, all this stuff is around understanding the story, understanding what it actually means for your business, but understanding your supply chain, understanding the actual value driver for that particular business within your wider supply chain, not just from the domestic conduit, but also in the international conduit, and vice versa when we're looking at foreign investment and our multinational, the growing multinational investment within our communities, from social impact through to all the various other funds that are actually out there, is around there's also this other piece that we have that's a really great, awesome product, and is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, knowledge, land, all that piece, but also wider than that, we've got such a multicultural. Is anyone in this, put up by a show of hands, right? And let's be really, really honest. Who's got more than one bloodline in their DNA? I welcome you as brothers and sisters and family. I have more than one. Look at my color. My mother's dark hair is a beautiful chocolate brown color. But in regards to my makeup, I'm also international. But the other piece in regards to this piece, and I just want to leave it off on this and throw it over to my sisters, is the piece understand where you're coming, what is the business plan, what is the value proposition. But more importantly, having those brothers and sisters that are actually going to add value around your positions. Do you have diversity and inclusion positions, Indigenous positions that are within your supply chain that are coordinator roles? Are there actually leadership roles? Then how do you affect change in your organization if they're only coordinating a program, if they're only coordinating a reconciliation action plan? It's about looking in the mirror and taking a really quick breath, but having a really, really strong conversation with sisters like my two sisters here, my three sisters up here, and other brothers and sisters, to be able to put, once again, I talk about action. Talk is good, but I'm working in the remote communities, and I'm working not just Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, I'm working with immigrants, migrants, I'm talking with sisters that have been in domestic violence. My team work with them. And they're going, what about us? Why isn't anyone asking us for this, some of the solutions, some of the things we can move forward? Anyway, I'll leave it.
Yeah, I think that one's really hit home to me, Murray, as well. You know, that coordinator comment really hits home. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we have 2,500 staff, I think, and we have beautiful, beautiful Indigenous leadership staff, but coordinating. So how do I help them lead? It's a really, really good take home. Sasha, one of the things that people are asking is it's back to that brave thing again. How did you first take that leap of faith? How did you initiate that conversation? You know, really to find the partner, to move forward, really to create these partnerships that you've built the foundation of your business on.
As I sort of mentioned before, it took kind of 3 years of research and of sort of having conversations around the periphery, I guess, of what we were looking at doing. So I guess because there was that consistency, so people started to realise that I wasn't going to sort of just in it with an idea and then I was going to go away. And I guess like a couple of the things that were really important was that firstly, like I wanted to make sure that financially our company was in a strong enough financially for us to be able to continue anything that we started for as long as our partners were willing to work on it. So I'd seen and heard and found out about all too many people who had maybe great intentions going into communities, coming up with ideas, but they didn't have the financial stability or backing to actually continue with it. So that was really important. And then it was really about sort of treading softly, I guess. So not going in all guns blazing, going, hey, I've got this great idea and, why don't you come along for the ride? Making sure we had all the right legal agreements and that it was really, the first sort of conversations were really questions rather than sort of statements or me trying to say that this is how it had to be. And we had very clear, I guess I'd learnt quite a bit over the 3 years of research around what would and wouldn't work. And so really tried to sort of come up with a process, I guess, that meant that it would be a success for the artists as well as for us.
So how much of that, going back to Shelly's point, how much of that at that stage was purpose-driven or business case, financial bottom line driven at that point in time? And when you look back now on the journey that you've been on, did you meet the business case or did you exceed the business case?
There probably wasn't a business case. I think it was a purpose-driven decision initially, but I think that in some ways has changed. I think we work with more and more big corporates in this space where we're sort of the bridge between the interior designers and architects and the artists and help to sort of often add our industrial design skills into the mix, but really sort of acting as that bridge between all of those parties to try and bring them together to get an outcome that often gives life in a very practical, real sense to their reconciliation action plans.
Can I just clarify something? Please don't think that I'm not saying that being purpose-driven is not important when I talk about the bottom line in the business case, because it's not the case. It has to be propelled by purpose, and that is where your vision sits. I'm merely suggesting that for those that aren't purpose-driven, and let's face it, we work with so many of those, surely. I know you're all here and there's an expectation that you're here because you're purpose-driven, but you don't always work with people who are, and there are some people that you need to convince to think differently and to see it differently in order to get their support and to harness their enthusiasm, because you can't do it alone. And the other thing I'd say too, just in what Sasha's saying and in support of what Sasha's saying, two big take-homes from what she has just said is that notion of giving yourself a bit of a break. You know, you don't have to get it right and you don't have to know all the answers and you don't have to go in with this, knowing it all, You just develop the relationships, you see what comes from them, and together you come up with the plan and the idea, the concept, the creative, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so it's a partnership, it's a genuine partnership as opposed to a consultation where you bring people in at the last minute. The second take home, I think, from what Sasha has said is that, in terms of giving yourself a break, take your time. Don't treat it like you might do other topics that are on your list at the moment of what you've got to do by June 30. Make the timeline flexible, because that's how First Nations people are going to treat it, trust me. They're going to see it as flexible and may not meet your time frame anyway. And those plans, those strategies that take time, particularly time to build the internal capability and build the internal buy-in, are the ones that are really successful. So just, give yourself and the organisation a bit of a break to take the time it needs to do that internal work.
I'm going to come back to the panel in a minute for a call to action, but I want to go to the floor for some questions. So there's a gentleman at the back. Can we get a microphone to him? Thank you very much.
Hi, Greg from Wynyard. Just want to expand on what Murray said and ask some opinion, because we supply Aboriginal furniture, Aboriginal company. we have a disparate range of customers, from those who are looking to tick the box to put something pretty in the reception area to say, oh, look, we're doing some Indigenous stuff, through to organisations who are really, truly trying to do it properly and engage properly. And they've all got reconciliation action plans. And as Murray said, some sit on the shelf and some actually are active. How can we report on this better or make it more transparent about who's actually really doing it properly versus ticking boxes?
Beautiful question. Shelly, do you want to take it first, or Murray?
I suppose the initial point is back to what Sister Shelly shared earlier. Once again, can I just get the brothers and sisters who've got a rap in their organisation to put your hand up? Conversation, right? Collaborating with each other. It's not enough of it. Too many industries and too many organisations are operating in silos in regards to their rap journey. Hence why we don't get the impact across all our industries, and two, in regards to we don't see the impact or be able to get the clarity around the reporting in regards to the metrics to be able to ask the question as an industry, regardless of what you are, construction, defence, wherever the hell you are, to be able to ask the question and go, look here, what does the actual rep metrics look like? And then the question is about actually talking to Reconciliation Australia, which are doing some fantastic work in regards to evolving that piece. But back to what Sister Shelly, and I'll hand it over to her because she's been leading this piece for a fair while now, is around that Elevate Rap piece. The Elevate Rap piece in regards to where you're meant to be in your maturity around those last two step changes is what? What is the key piece around that, my sister?
You answer that.
Metrics. Metrics. You're meant to have metrics. But if you have 300 or 400, how many reps have we got, my sister?
1,200.
1,200. And you've got 1,200 businesses measuring the metrics within their supply chain 1,200 ways. How do you create an evidence base to actually see the change? How do you actually inform the sector? How do you actually inform the reconciliation change? And that's why Sister Shelly, Sister Sasha, and other brothers and sisters that are enablers, including yourself as an Indigenous business and brothers and sisters in here, is about going, how do we pull together under the guidance of Reconciliation Australia and also enablers like Sister Shelly?
Can I add to that and say that those that want to partner with organisations that have a RAP will often look to see how genuine their RAP is before they partner with them. And so there is a degree of auditing going on the ground without you even knowing it. So there's a number of organisations that approach me about working with us, and we do our own internal audit, and we decide whether it's an organisation that we would like to partner with or not. In other words, provide services to or not. But we're purpose-driven, and so at the end of the day, if we feel that or smell that there's a box being ticked, then we generally recommend them to someone else.
And I think to come back to the point that I made earlier, I wasn't just talking about public benefit corporations for the government to give business tax break, but I like that. It also is accountability. It's like B Corp. It's published. You can go into my B Corp statement, you can see my matrix, you can see what I've done. The same with Sasha. You can compare big companies with small companies, with government companies, you know. So for me, having that accountable framework in some way that is published helps in that situation. And I think the other thing I've really learned a lot about today is there are some really good practices going on that is good to know about and aspire to, and therefore learn from as well. But we just don't, it shouldn't take a panel, should it really, to start calling out the companies that are doing really well. And I'm going to say something that's probably contentious, but I'll say it. And this is me again decrying myself, but I really, and I know there's somebody here from Rio Tinto, so I apologize. But, you know, when the slap on the wrist came to Rio Tinto, I certainly started to take much more seriously the commitment that we were looking at making for the RAP. Now, I know that's not the way that we want to do it, but what was your view on that, Shelly, at that time?
I was delighted. Yeah. And this is not finger-pointing again at Rio. There's a lot of organisations that are guilty of the same thing. It's just that we know about Rio. What it said to me is that of the 25 years that I've been involved in the reconciliation space in a formal manner and in leadership roles, that we've absolutely got somewhere. When you've got to the point, when you've got to the point where you've got a people's movement that help drive and absolutely drive actually the outcome of the resignation of an organisation's key leaders on the back of a social justice disaster, then you know that you've really made some traction. People power is where the real power is, and they often will drive the decisions that we make at a corporate level. And so I was delighted, but I think it's another one of those examples that we can draw on when we're talking to people who are the naysayers about being involved in this area of why it makes good business sense.
Absolutely. Any final question from the floor? Come on, guys, you've got...
Enthused.
There
Awesome.
there was
Great.
one for you, Linda.
I know, I was kind of missing mine a little bit because I felt this isn't about me. But the question for Linda, and I'm also interested in hearing the panel, is the education and training sector embedding quality, inclusion and diversity into curricula for tomorrow's workforce? Not enough. We don't do enough. And really interesting for me, my platform's actually female leadership. But for me, it's inclusion. And one of the things that we are trying to do in building a brand new university is everybody in my organisation has to do a social impact project. They're change makers. That's why they come to us. They're brave. They come to a private uni rather than a public uni. So that is part of our DNA, you know, being that public benefit corporation and being good. But we do not do enough in any shape or form. And it has to start really early on, you know, in kindy. In the curriculum, and storytelling and history, and you know, getting our real history into the curriculum is critical. And unfortunately for me, I also have an organisation in New Zealand, and it's much easier for me in New Zealand because and that's not a cop-out, but it's just actually mandated that the way that we design training, we design degrees, we design education in New Zealand has to take into account the principles of Maori and Pacifica. And that is an enrichment for I've got a games design, media design business in New Zealand. How amazing. There's no more creative people than Maori and Pacifica people in New Zealand. So we gain a lot from that. So I want to come to you guys. What else could we be doing to really start to, because, you know, I don't know if you know, but there's a CEO conference last week in America where they decided that they would get rid of the degree as an entry qualification because they felt it was inequitable, which it is. I got rid of the ATAR 3 years ago, right? But for me, what does that say? We're getting rid of it because it's a barrier, but we should be fixing it also. So I suppose I'm going to come to each of you just to get a quick point on education and what more we could be doing from a selfish point of view.
Go to my website and you'll get some ideas about how to educate yourself, first of all. But second, and I also will be a little controversial here, if you don't mind.
Please.
I think, you know, we talk about unconscious bias within the workplace a lot. It's a fabricated word that's come up to mask the real word, which is racism. That's what unconscious bias is. But racism is just such an ugly word. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to think that we are one of those, that our organisations are challenged by it, so on and so forth. But we have to have those difficult and large conversations within an organisation, senior leadership right through to the broader workforce. And it's those big, uncomfortable, brave conversations that will help shift the dial eventually. And because it's often those things that get in the way of us making progress, making real progress. You know, all of you probably have some amazing strategies in place about tackling this issue and making an impact. And there's lots of great strategies out there, lots of people doing great things, as we said before. But if you think about all the lofty aspirations across the country, particularly across the corporate sector, I have the view that we will be really challenged to meet any of those if we don't have the core conversation about the relationship between us and be willing to sit in the uncomfortable conversation in order to get somewhere. And so I guess it's a challenge. I know it's a big one, and I know it's a controversial one, the big R word, but I really do think that we need to dig deep. And if you think about, hands up for those of you that somehow or other got involved in the apology of the stolen generations, either at work or home. Did you watch it? Did you get engaged? Great. And I remember saying at the time to a journalist that it was that day that I really felt, when we think about the relationship between us, that as Australians we looked in the mirror and we liked what we saw. And I think when we're big and brave enough to have those uncomfortable conversations and we get to the other side, we'll be able to look in the mirror again and be really proud of what we see.
I really appreciate that, and it's an incredible call to action. And I, for one, am going to commit to call it what it is. So thank you for that. Murray, a final word and call to action from you.
I think I probably hit it on probably all the way through. What I've shared is about action. Is about looking at your supply chain and the value stream, also the value chain that you're trying to create, downstream and upstream. Give everyone a voice, get everyone involved in regards to it. Executive has to drive it, has to drive the change, and it has to come off the shelf, and it has to move. If you are stifled, if you are stuck in regards to getting some of the initiatives that you are trying to push forward, reach out to relevant diversity groups, diversity professionals to be able to create that and move that forward. So thanks a lot, my sister.
Yeah, and I think Murray as well, I think one of the things that the three of you have said, I'll come to Sasha at the end, is get out to that table and meet each other. How many people in here have got a damn rap and you're not talking to each other? That just for me is crazy. I'm a lazy person. I want to learn from everybody else. So please meet each other, swap phone numbers, whatever you do in this beautiful technological world, but create a connection today around your First Nations strategy and your RAP. And if you walk out of here with one person that you've met or you've just committed to phone in the next few weeks and say, remember that conversation? We've done something in here then today. Sasha, you just warm my heart, right? Your humbleness around how you've created this environment that is safe and courageous and purpose-driven, but also profit-driven now for you too, is just an amazing example to us all. Leave us with a call to action.
I think all of us owe it to ourselves as Australians to get educated in relation to this area. So to read, to watch, to talk to people, to have conversations, and to really understand what the true history was and is. Because I think if each of us does that as an individual and then influences another person and another person, before long there's a movement and everyone will sort of be along on the journey. You can't necessarily rely on the education system, unfortunately, but all of us can educate ourselves, and there are so many tools from Shelly's website to, all sorts of other things that you can read and look at to help you to become conversant in this area.
I want to thank the panel for their honesty, for their courageous conversation. I certainly have gone away with a really warm heart, and I've gone away with knowing that there's something that I can personally do, which I think it feels really important. I hope you do in the room. If you haven't, it's your own fault because you didn't ask the question, okay? But please meet and have a conversation, and please commit to meeting somebody else today so that we can really do what's right. And I think we all have a commitment to that. Thank you, amazing panel.
A couple of really strong take-home messages from that for me. Firstly, and Linda, you were so eloquent at the beginning, once you can acknowledge that you're shit scared, you can invite solutions and suggestions and collaborations, but it does take that humanity that we mentioned yesterday to really start to break that down. The second, and Shelly mentioned it, that need for reconciliation action plan connection, collaboration. And so, yes, lunchtime, please, group, get together, make those connections if you haven't already. Murray, you mentioned, conversation, but the question, do you actually understand what an Indigenous procurement policy means for your business, and are you the right person to be rolling it out? That's a really important question. Are you the right person? Is the right person rolling that out? And again, returning to metrics, you've got to have a proper evidence base against which to measure change. Really important. And then lastly, Shelly's point about unconscious bias. Is that unconscious bias or is that just racism? You need to call things for what they are. So a big thank you. That was an amazing session. Now, as we lead from one session into the other, we are going to have another poll. I know you're excited here in the room. You can sense the excitement building. Please, just for a second, here in the room, take a second, relax your shoulders, roll your shoulders, have a stretch. Stretch up, stretch. This is my Jane Fonda moment, so don't take it away from me. Stretch up. Just move around a bit. Thank you. There you go. Stretch around just a little bit. Get the blood flowing. As we start, there's a quick question which is going out on Chime Live, but given the pressing need to decarbonize our economies within this decade, not in future, but within this decade, do you feel that your organization is ready, able, and committed to do this? Not just ready, not just able, not just committed, but ready, able, and committed to do this. So I'll get a show of hands in the room, if I may. Given the pressing need to decarbonize our economies, do you feel your organization is ready, able, and committed to do this? Let's have a show of hands for yes. Yes? All right, thank you. And let's have a show of hands for no. There's a few half hands for no, which I will understand. That's okay. Thank you. That was, I would guess, probably 75% were yes. There was probably 10% of not putting their hands up, and another 15 or so. Let's have a look at the online results, if we may. Thank you. Okay. That's possibly a bit more honest online because they're not being identified, but I'm not going to push that too hard. 53% of people online were saying yes, ready, willing, and able, or ready, able, and committed, and 47% of people were saying no, which I kind of find fascinating considering who's in the room and who's online.